Luna was 7 years old the night she made two phone calls that changed everything. The first one saved her mother's life. The second one, the one she made alone in the dark 3 days later, to a number her mother had buried under the floorboards and never once touched, that one cracked the world open in a way none of them were ready for. Because the man who answered that call wasn't just a stranger. He was Knox Mercer. He ran the most dangerous criminal network in the city, and he had absolutely no idea that somewhere out there two little girls had been growing up without him until a 7-year-old with shaking hands and a heart made of iron decided that enough was enough. If this story already has your chest tight, hit subscribe right now and stay with me until the very end. And drop a comment, tell me what city you are watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The kitchen floor was cold. That was the detail Luna would remember years later. Not the sound of her mother falling, not the way the grocery bag split open and sent oranges rolling across the linoleum, not even her own voice screaming. Just the cold. The way the floor was cold against her knees when she dropped down beside her mother's body and pressed her ear to her chest and listened with everything she had for a heartbeat. It was there. Faint, uneven, but there. "Mama," she said it once quietly like a question, then again louder. "Mama, wake up. Please wake up." Ara Chen did not wake up. Luna had been 7 years old for exactly 43 days. In those 43 days, she had learned to make macaroni on the stove, to sign her own permission slips in handwriting that almost looked like her mother's, and to set 3 separate alarms on the old phone, because Ara always silenced the first 2 in her sleep and never remembered doing it. She had learned these things not because anyone taught her, but because someone had to, and she was the someone available. But she had never learned what to do when her mother was unconscious on the kitchen floor and not answering. She learned it now. "Violet," her voice came out calm. She did not know how. "Violet, come here." Her sister appeared in the doorway, 5 years old, dark curls, eyes already filling that mouth, already starting to tremble in that specific way that meant 30 seconds until full crying. "Is Mama?" She fainted. Luna didn't know if that was true, but it was the word that would keep Violet from spiraling. "She needs help. I need you to go get my phone off the bed. Don't run. Walk fast." But Luna, walk fast, Violet. Not harsh, firm. There was a difference, and Violet knew it. Violet went. Luna turned back to her mother. Ara's chest was rising and falling in slow, shallow pulls. Her lips were slightly parted. There was a bruise already forming on her cheekbone from the fall, a dark, spreading shadow that Luna looked at and then looked away from, because if she kept looking, she was going to stop being calm, and she could not stop being calm right now. She put her hand flat on her mother's sternum, felt each breath, counted. "I've got you," she whispered. "I've got you, Mama. You're okay. You're going to be okay." She was saying it to herself as much as she was saying it to Ara. Violet came back with the phone held out in both hands like an offering. Luna dialed 911. The operator picked up on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency?" "My mom fell and she won't wake up." Luna's voice didn't shake. She would be amazed by this later. She would replay this moment in her head for years, the way her own voice sounded like a stranger's, controlled and precise like someone who had done this before. "She's breathing, but she won't respond. I'm 7. My sister is 5. We're alone. The address is 1182 Delmore Street, apartment 4C. A half beat of silence, the operator recalibrating. "Okay, sweetheart. You are doing exactly the right thing. I have help on the way. Can you stay on the line with me?" "Yes." "Is your mom on her back or her side?" "Her side." She fell sideways. "Good. Don't move her. Can you see her breathing?" Luna watched her mother's rib cage. Up. Pause. Up. Pause. Yes, it's slow. "That's okay. That's okay. You're doing great. What's your name?" "Luna." "Luna, that's a beautiful name. You are being so brave right now." "Is there any blood?" Luna checked, methodically. Ara's head, her arms the floor around her. "No." "Okay, help is 4 minutes away. Can you go unlock the front door so they can get in?" Luna looked at Violet, who was now sitting on the floor next to their mother with her small hand pressed against Ara's arm, not crying anymore, just holding on with everything she had. "Violet," Luna said, "go unlock the front door, then come straight back." Violet stood up. She walked to the door. Luna heard the chain slide, heard the deadbolt click. She looked back at her mother. Ara's eyelashes fluttered. Just barely. Just once. Mama, Luna leaned closer. Mama, can you hear me? Nothing. But that flutter had been something. Luna grabbed onto it like a lifeline. She pressed her hand back over her mother's heart, and she held on, and she counted the seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 237, which was how long it took for the paramedics to arrive. She counted every single one. They said it was exhaustion, severe hypoglycemia, a body that had been running on empty for so long it had simply submitted without warning. They used words like vascular episode, an acute stress response, and severely depleted reserves. But what Luna heard underneath in all the clinical language was your mother has been slowly disappearing, and none of you noticed in time. She noticed. She had noticed for months. The way Ara sat down on the edge of the bed at night before she even took her shoes off, already too tired to do the next thing. The way she stared at the refrigerator, sometimes for 30 seconds, without opening it, like her brain had sent the signal, but her body had stopped caring. The dark circles, the weight she kept losing, the cough that came and came back worse. Luna had noticed all of it. She had written none of it down because writing it down would have made it real. In the ambulance, one of the paramedics, a young woman with red hair and kind eyes, sat beside Luna and Violet and said, "You called really fast. That was exactly the right thing to do. You may have saved her life." Violet looked at Luna. Luna stared at the floor of the ambulance and thought it shouldn't be my job to save her life. "I'm 7. She didn't say that out loud. She had never said anything like that out loud. She suspected she never would. Was she all? Mrs. Caldwell from 4A took them in without a single question, which was one of the things Luna had always loved about her. She was 72 and moved slowly and kept hard candies in a bowl by the television and never asked for explanations, only offered solutions. She sat Violet down with a blanket and a peppermint and turned on something soft and animated, and she put a cup of warm milk in front of Luna, and she sat down across the kitchen table and looked at her with eyes that had seen enough of the world to understand what they were looking at. "You did good tonight," Mrs. Caldwell said. Luna wrapped both hands around the mug. "I should have noticed sooner. I knew she wasn't." She stopped. "You're 7. I know. Knowing doesn't always make it easier, does it?" Luna didn't answer. She drank the milk. It was warm and it was too sweet, and it was the kindest thing anyone had done for her in longer than she wanted to think about. She waited until Mrs. Caldwell had gone to check on Violet. Then she sat alone in the kitchen and stared at the table and thought about the box. She had found it 3 weeks ago. She hadn't been looking for it, not exactly. She had been looking for her library card, which had vanished into the mysterious void where small, important things disappeared in their apartment on a rotating basis. She had checked the usual places, the junk drawer, the shelf by the door, the little basket on the bathroom sink that was supposed to be organized but was really just where objects went to lose their identities. No card. She had gone to the bedroom closet, crouched down, and started checking the floor, and that's when she noticed it, the loose board in the corner. She had known it was loose. It had always been slightly raised, a centimeter gap that caught her toe, sometimes in the dark. She had never thought much about it. That day, something made her stop. She had pried it up with a butter knife, slowly, like some part of her already knew she was opening something that couldn't be unopened. The box was cardboard old, the edges worn soft with age. Inside, a rubber band around a stack of envelopes, maybe 15, maybe 20, all sealed, never opened, addressed in a handwriting she didn't recognize. A Polaroid photograph face down. A single folded piece of paper. She had picked up the photograph last. The man in it was tall, dark-haired. He was standing outside somewhere, half-turned toward the camera, like he hadn't fully agreed to be photographed. His jaw sharp, his eyes guarded but not unkind. He was maybe 30 in the picture. He looked like someone who made decisions. He looked in a way that Luna couldn't explain and couldn't stop looking at like her. Same jaw, same eyes, same expression of someone processing information and revealing nothing. She had flipped the Polaroid over. On the back in her mother's handwriting, Knox, August. No year, just Knox, just August. She had put everything back. She had pressed the board down. She had walked back to the kitchen and found her library card on the counter, which she had almost certainly already checked twice. She had put it in her pocket. She had not told anyone about the box. She had Googled the name from the school library the following Monday. Just Knox, just to see what a first name alone would pull. There had been a company, some real estate developments, a few blurry photos from charity events, the kind that newspapers ran on page 12 with short captions and no follow-up. In one of them, she had found him again, older than in the Polaroid, a dark suit, standing at the edge of a crowd of smiling people, not smiling himself with the particular stillness of someone who is never entirely at ease in rooms with too many witnesses. The caption read, "Only Knox Mercer Holdings attended the annual St. Catherine's Gala." She had looked at that caption for a long time. Then she had closed the browser, cleared the history the way she'd seen Ara do once, and gone back to class and not thought about it again. Until tonight. Until tonight, when she sat at Mrs. Caldwell's kitchen table at 1 a.m. and thought my mother almost died. She almost died alone on the kitchen floor, and I don't know what happens to us if she actually does. I don't know who comes. I don't know what the plan is. I've never known what the plan is because Ara doesn't make plans about that. She just keeps moving forward and trusting that nothing will break beyond repair. And tonight, something almost did. She thought about the stack of unopened envelopes. She thought about the name on the back of the Polaroid. She thought, I am 7 years old and I cannot fix this by myself. She went back to the apartment, used the spare key Mrs. Caldwell kept on a hook inside the door, walked through the dark hallway into the bedroom, pried up the board, took the folded piece of paper, unfolded it. A phone number written in that same unfamiliar handwriting as the envelopes in black ink in numbers that had been pressed into the paper with the kind of force that meant it had been written down once and never rewritten. Luna stood in the middle of her dark bedroom with the number in her hand. Her heart was going so fast she could feel it in her ears. She dialed. It rang once, twice, 3 times. She counted. 4. Then a voice. Low, quiet, the kind of voice that occupied space without effort. Not threatening, just inevitable. Who is this? Luna's throat tightened. She pushed through it. My name is Luna. I'm 7 years old. I think you might know my mother. Her name is Ara Chen. The silence that followed was unlike any silence she had ever heard. It wasn't blank. It was loaded, dense with something invisible and enormous, like the pressure in the air before a storm that hasn't announced itself yet. Where did you get this number? From a box my mother hid under the floorboard in our bedroom. She kept going because if she stopped, she would lose her nerve, and she could not lose her nerve, not tonight, not after everything. There was a picture of you. There were letters she never opened, and this number. A breath. She collapsed tonight. She's in the hospital. I'm 7 and my sister is 5 and I don't. Her voice finally fractured. Just barely, just at the edges. I don't know what else to do. Complete silence. Then, how old did you say you are? 7. And your sister? 5. Her name is Violet. Silence again, but different this time. Not the silence of someone deciding. The silence of someone absorbing something that is rearranging the architecture of everything they thought was solid. What hospital? He said. She told him. The line went dead. Luna stood in the dark and breathed. Then she walked back to Mrs. Caldwell's apartment, lay down next to Violet, and stared at the ceiling until morning, turning the conversation over and over in her mind like a stone she wasn't sure she should have picked up, but had picked it up, and now there was no putting it back down. Said, Knox Mercer had been in the middle of something that should have had his complete and undivided attention. 3 men, a back room, a situation involving a shipment out of the port that had gone wrong in ways that were going to require specific and expedient solutions that could not be delayed without consequence. These were not the kind of men who accepted delays. These were not the kind of meetings where you stepped out to take a call. He stepped out to take the call. Dario, his second, his shadow 11 years at his side, through everything appeared in the doorway within 15 seconds. Knox. Knox held up one finger without turning around. The universal signal for not now. And when Knox gave that signal, it had never once needed to be given twice. He stood in the narrow hallway and listened to a child's voice dismantle in under 60 seconds everything he had spent 8 years not thinking about. Ara Chen. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 8 years. He had not allowed himself to think it more than a handful of times, and on each of those occasions, he had shut it down quickly and efficiently, the way you shut down a fire before it finds a wall. You stopped it early, you stopped it clean, you didn't let it breathe. He had been very good at not letting it breathe, and now a 7-year-old was on the phone telling him that Ara was in the hospital and that there were 2 girls, 5 and 7, and that one of them sounded exactly like him when she was trying not to cry. He lowered the phone. Dario was still in the doorway, watching him with the careful expression of a man who had learned over 11 years to read the temperature of a room by Knox's posture alone. What happened? Knox didn't answer right away. He stood there for a moment with the phone at his side and something moving across his face that Dario had never seen before and couldn't name. Cancel the meeting. Tell them tomorrow. Knox, these men don't. Tomorrow. He was already walking. Tell them whatever you need to tell them. I don't care. Where are you going? Knox stopped. He turned just far enough to meet Dario's eyes across the hallway, and whatever Dario saw there, whatever had replaced the usual flat, calculated control that Knox wore like a second skin, made the question die in his throat before he could finish asking it. Knox walked out. Dario stood alone in the hallway for a long moment. Then he went back into the room and told 3 dangerous men that tonight's meeting was being postponed, and he used the tone of voice that meant the subject was not open for debate, and he spent the entire time thinking about Knox's face in the hallway and what could possibly put an expression like that on a man like Knox Mercer. He didn't have an answer. Knox sat in his car in the hospital parking garage for 11 minutes. He had never sat in a parking garage in his life. He moved, he acted, he processed on his feet, made decisions. That Speed had built an entire existence around the principle that hesitation was the most expensive thing a person could afford. The men who hesitated were the men who lost. He sat in the garage for 11 minutes because inside this building was a woman who had looked at him once a long time ago in a way that no one before or since had looked at him, like she saw through everything. He was right down to the part of him he kept in the dark, even from himself, and was not afraid of what she found. And he had left, not because he didn't feel it, not because it wasn't real, but because he had told himself that everything he touched eventually broke, and he would rather leave her whole than watch her break. He had told himself that for 8 years. He had believed it. He believed it a little less right now, sitting in a parking garage at 2 a.m, on his way to meet 2 children whose existence he hadn't known about for 5 and 7 years, respectively. He got out of the car. He rode the elevator to the 3rd floor. He followed the signs for the waiting area. He pushed through the double doors. And then he stopped. Because there they were, 2 girls in plastic chairs against the far wall, the small one asleep, head tilted, fingers wrapped around her sister's sleeve. The older one, Luna, upright, awake, watching the door, watching him. She had his eyes. She had his jaw. She had that stillness, that particular unnerving stillness that Knox had spent his entire adult life being the only person in the room who possessed it, and she was looking at him across a hospital waiting room with an expression that said, "I see you and I have already started deciding what to do about you." She stood up, 4 feet tall, 7 years old. She walked toward him with her shoulders squared and her chin level and stopped 4 feet away, and they looked at each other in silence. And Knox Mercer, who had looked at men twice his size without blinking, felt something inside his chest that he had absolutely no category for. Then the small one opened her eyes. Violet looked at him. Her mouth opened. And then she slid off the chair, crossed the entire waiting room in about 6 steps, and wrapped both arms around his leg and buried her face against him and didn't say a word. Knox stood completely still. His hands hung at his sides. He looked down at the top of her head. The dark curls, Ara's curls, and he felt it, the thing he had been keeping in the locked room behind the locked door in the part of himself he never visited. He felt it open, slowly, irreversibly. Don't make promises. He looked up. Luna was watching him with those eyes, his eyes steady and grave. Don't make promises, she repeated. People make promises when they show up late. They think it helps. It doesn't. It's just something for them to break later and for us to remember. She held his gaze without flinching. So don't. Knox was quiet for a moment. Then he lowered himself slowly until he was eye level with her. Violet still clung to his leg. He didn't try to move her. What if I just stay, he said, tonight. No promises, just staying. Luna looked at him for a long time, long enough that he could see her processing it, weighing it, testing its weight, looking for the place where it was going to give. Okay, she said finally. It wasn't warm, it wasn't an open door. It was the sound of someone agreeing to a limited trial under specific terms with no guarantee of renewal. It was also, Knox thought, the most important word anyone had ever said to him. He sat down in the waiting room, 2 chairs down from Luna at a distance that felt respectful rather than remote. Violet, after a moment, climbed into the chair between them. Then she climbed into his lap. He held himself very still and then very gradually, like a man learning something he had no manual for, he put his arm around her. Luna watched this from the corner of her eye. She turned back to the hallway. Neither of them spoke for a long time. At 4:20 in the morning, a nurse appeared and said that Ara was stable, resting, and could have visitors in the morning. Luna nodded once sharply, the way she did everything. Knox asked for the room number. The nurse looked between the girls and the man with the dark circles under his eyes, who didn't look like he belonged in a hospital waiting room, but looked more than anything like someone trying to understand how he'd ended up in one. Are you family? The nurse asked. Knox looked at Luna. Luna looked straight ahead at the hallway wall. Yes, Knox said quietly. I'm their father. The nurse gave him the room number and left. Violet was already asleep in his lap. Luna did not look at him, but her hands, which had been folded tight in her lap, knuckles, white fingers locked slowly opened, one finger at a time, like a person who hasn't trusted anyone in a long time, deciding not yet, not all the way, but deciding to try. Ara opened her eyes at 6:43 in the morning, and the first thing she saw was the ceiling tiles of a hospital room, white and flat and indifferent. And the second thing she saw was Luna, asleep in the chair beside her bed, with her arms folded across her chest and her chin dropped forward, still wearing yesterday's clothes. The sight of it hit Ara like a fist to the sternum. She lay still for a moment, just breathing, taking inventory the way you do when you've been unconscious and your body is reporting back in pieces. IV in her left arm. Heart monitor beeping slow and steady. A thin blanket pulled up to her waist. Her cheek throbbed where she had hit the floor. And the floor, the kitchen floor, the cold linoleum. The last thing she remembered came back to her in one swift, nauseating wave. She had collapsed, in front of her own kitchen, with her children in the next room. You're awake. Ara turned her head. Luna was watching her, fully alert, the sleep wiped clean from her face in an instant. She hadn't even moved from the chair. She had just opened her eyes and been present already before Ara had finished processing where she was. Hey, baby, Ara said. Her voice came out wrong, rough, and thin, scraped hollow. Don't hey baby me. Luna stood up and came to the side of the bed and looked at her mother with those dark, serious eyes that had always been too old for her face. You have to eat. The nurse said your blood sugar was critically low. She said you probably hadn't eaten a real meal in days. Was that true? Ara opened her mouth. Don't lie, Luna said. Ara closed her mouth. I knew it. Luna pulled the chair closer and sat down and folded her hands in her lap, like a very small, very exhausted attorney who had already seen every version of this case. Mama, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep, you're disappearing. I can see it. I've been seeing it, and I didn't say anything, and I should have said something. Luna, Air's voice cracked. That is not your job. Then whose job is it? Luna asked quietly, without accusation, which somehow made it worse. Because I've been looking and I don't see anyone else. Ara had no answer for that. She looked at her daughter, 7 years old, dark circles under her eyes from a night in a hospital. Waiting room, chin steady, hands steady, everything steady. In that specific way that broke Ara's heart every single time, because steadiness like that in a child wasn't a gift. It was armor, and armor only grew when something kept swinging at you. Where's Violet? Ara asked. Waiting room. She fell asleep on. Luna stopped. Something crossed her face, a micro-expression, fast and complicated, there and gone. On the couch. Ara noticed the pause. On the couch, she repeated, or on something else. Luna looked at her hands. Every instinct Ara had went quiet and cold and alert all at once. Luna. She pushed herself upright against the pillow, ignoring the way her head swam with the effort. Luna, look at me. What happened last night? What aren't you telling me? Luna looked up, and in her daughter's eyes, Ara saw something she had never seen there before. Not fear, not guilt, but the very specific expression of someone who has done a thing they cannot undo and has decided to stop pretending otherwise. I called him Mom, Luna said. The heart monitor beside the bed spiked. Ara's entire body went still. What? I called him. Luna's voice was even, deliberate. She had clearly been preparing this. I found the box 3 weeks ago, under the board in the closet. I wasn't snooping. It was looking for my library card, but I found it. There was a picture and a number, and Mama, you collapsed. You were on the floor and you weren't waking up, and I didn't know what to do, What did you do? Ara's voice was barely sound. I called the number on the paper. Luna held her ground even as her hands tightened in her lap. He came last night. He was here. He's probably still in the waiting room. Ara Chen had not cried in front of her daughters in 14 months. She had made herself a roast embodiment after the last time when Violet had seen her sobbing over the kitchen sink at midnight and had not been able to sleep properly for a week afterward. She had held everything since then in the specific, exhausting way that you hold water in cupped hands, always leaking, never emptying, never spilling over. She spilled over now, not loudly, not dramatically. Just 2 tears fast and hot that she didn't catch in time, and then she pressed her hand over her mouth and breathed through it and did not let it become more than that because Luna was watching her with an expression that was 6 parts fear and 4 parts determination, and Ara would not let her daughter think she had done something wrong. Luna, she reached out and took her daughter's hands. They were cold. They were always cold, just like hers. Look at me. Luna looked. You didn't do anything wrong, Ara said. Do you understand me? Whatever happens next, you were trying to protect us. You did not do anything wrong. Luna's chin wobbled, just once. Then it steadied. Are you scared? Yes. Of him? Ara was quiet for a moment, a long, honest moment. I don't know, she said finally, and it was the truest thing she'd said in years. I don't know what I am. She knew what she had been 8 years ago. She had been 22 and new to the city and working double shifts at a restaurant that no longer existed, and Knox Mercer had walked in one night with 2 other men and the particular presence of someone who rearranges a room just by being in it. She had known even then who he was, not specifics, not details, but the broad shape of him, the way the other staff moved around him with a deference that was half respect and half something else entirely. She had told herself to stay away. She had not stayed away. What followed had been 5 months of something that she had never fully been able to categorize, not quite a relationship in any traditional sense, not a fling in any trivial one. Something that lived in its own category, fierce and complicated, and lit from the inside in a way that she had never experienced before and hadn't since. And then one morning she had woken up and he was gone. No note, no call, no explanation. And 3 weeks later, she had discovered she was pregnant and she had called the number she had for him exactly once and gotten no answer, and she had made herself a decision. She had written the number down anyway. She didn't know why. She had told herself it was practical in case of emergency, in case of medical history, in case of something she couldn't anticipate. She had never once let herself admit the real reason, which was that some part of her had not been ready to make him entirely disappear. And now he was in the waiting room. 8 years later, 20 yards away. Her 7-year-old had made the call she never could. She pressed both hands flat against the hospital blanket and made herself breathe. Okay, she said, not to Luna, to herself. Okay. What do you want me to do? Luna asked. Nothing. Ara straightened, pushed her hair back from her face. The IV tugged at her arm and she ignored it. I want you to go get Violet and bring her here. And I want you to not say anything to him on your way. Can you do that? He's probably still asleep, Luna said. She paused. He was awake all night. With us. He didn't leave. That detail landed somewhere in Ara's chest like a stone dropped into still water, spreading outward in rings she couldn't stop. She said nothing. Luna went. Ara sat alone in the hospital room and listened to the heart monitor and waited for the world she had built carefully and at great cost to finish rearranging itself, because it was rearranging, she could feel it, with the particular inevitability of something that had always been on its way and had simply finally arrived. Knox was not asleep. He had not slept. He had spent the night in the waiting room chair with Violet gradually colonizing his lap and Luna keeping watch 2 seats over, and he had stared at the ceiling and thought about 8 years of choices the way you think about a ledger when you've just realized the numbers don't add up the way you told yourself they did. When Luna appeared in the waiting room doorway at 7 in the morning and said, "My mom is awake," he said nothing. He helped Violet untangle herself from the chair, steadied her when she wobbled on her feet, and watched them walk down the hallway until they turned the corner. Then he sat back down. Dario called at 7:15. Knox let it ring. It called again. He picked up. "Are you alive?" Dario asked. "Yes." "Are you going to explain last night?" "No, not yet." A pause. "The men from the meeting, they're asking questions." "Tell them they'll have answers by tomorrow." "Knox." "Tomorrow, Dario." His voice was measured, but there was an edge underneath it that Dario heard clearly. "Manage it." He ended the call. He sat with the phone in his hand and looked at the hallway where the girls had disappeared, and he thought about Violet's face when she had first looked at him. No hesitation, no fear. Just this pure and uncomplicated recognition, like something in her had known before her brain caught up. He thought about Luna in the chair across from him all night, never fully sleeping, always with one eye cracked open, watchful, holding the room together by sheer force of personality. His daughters. The word was enormous and entirely unreal, and more real than anything he had felt in years, all at the same time. He was still sitting there when he heard footsteps in the hallway, and he looked up, and Ara walked through the waiting room door. She had one hand on the IV stand, and she was moving slowly, and she looked exhausted in a way that went down to the bone, the bruise on her cheek, the thin hospital gown, the dark circles that told the whole story of the last several years more clearly than anything she could have said. But her spine was straight, her chin was level. Her eyes, when they found him, were absolutely direct. He stood up. They looked at each other across the waiting room. 4 feet of air between them and 8 years of everything neither of them had said. Ara spoke first. "Where are the girls?" "Nurse offered them breakfast. They went." He paused. "Luna put up a fight about leaving you. I told her you'd come find us." "You talked to her?" "She told me to tell you she'd be back in 15 minutes and that you should drink water." Something shifted in Ara's face. It wasn't amusement exactly. It was more complicated than that. "That sounds right." Silence. "You should be in bed," Knox said. "I know." She didn't move. "I needed to see you first. I needed to..." She stopped, started again. "I don't know what Luna told you." "She told me you collapsed, that you were in the hospital, that she was 7 and her sister was 5, and she didn't know what else to do." He kept his voice level. "That was enough." Ara looked at him. "You came." "Of course I came." "Knox, you." She pressed her hand against her sternum for a moment, a gesture he recognized she used to do it when something hit too fast, when she needed a second to absorb before she responded. "You left 8 years ago. You left without..." "I know." "You didn't call. You didn't..." "I know." His voice was quiet, absolute, not defensive, just "I know. All of it, I know. I'm not going to stand here and tell you I had a good reason. I had a reason. Whether it was good is..." He paused. "It wasn't good enough. Nothing I tell you tonight would be good enough." Akha stared at him. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were bright in a way that was not tears and was not warmth. It was something rawer than both. "I called you once when I found out. It rang and rang." Knox closed his eyes briefly, opened them. "I know." "You knew, I didn't know why you were calling. He stopped. "I was in a situation. I let it go. When I called back, the number was disconnected." He watched her face. "I told myself you'd moved on. I told myself it was better." "You told yourself it was better," Ara repeated. "I was wrong." 3 words, no elaboration, no excuse wrapped around them, no qualification to soften them. Just the words in that quiet, direct voice offered like something being set down at her feet. Ara looked at him for a long time. "I have 2 daughters," she said finally. "They're 5 and 7. Luna reads at a 5th grade level, and she cannot fall asleep until every door in the apartment is checked twice. Violet still sleeps with a stuffed rabbit named Gerald, and she laughs at things before you finish saying them because she already knows they're going to be funny. Her voice was very controlled. You missed all of it. You missed every single bit of it. Yes, Knox said, I did. And you think you can just... She stopped. Her hand tightened on the IV stand. She said, do you think happens now? You show up in a waiting room and Violet climbs into your lap and that's... I don't know what happens now, he said. And it was clearly true. She could hear it in his voice, the genuine not knowing, which was something she had never once associated with Knox Mercer. He had always known. He had always been 3 steps ahead of every room he walked into. Hearing him say, I don't know, was like watching something fundamental shift. I don't have a plan. I don't have an answer. I know I'm not leaving. You don't get to make that decision. No, he agreed. You do, and Luna does. A pause. Honestly, mostly Luna. And despite everything, despite the bruise on her cheek and the IV in her arm and 8 years of silence in the hospital room and the collapsed kitchen floor, and all of it, Ara made a sound that was almost a laugh. It surprised her. She pressed her hand over her mouth like she was trying to catch it. Knox watched her, and something in his face for just a moment was completely unguarded. Come sit down, she said finally. Not warmly, not an invitation. The same limited conditional tone that Luna had used last night, terms subject to revision, no guarantee of permanence, proceed with caution. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't. Come sit down anyway. There are things you need to know. About them, about how things are. She turned toward the hallway, one hand still on the stand. And Knox, she glanced back at him over her shoulder. If you disappear again, if you walk back out of this in a week, a month, whenever it gets complicated, I will make sure those girls never think about you again. I will be that thorough. Do you understand me? I know. The way she said it was not a threat. It was a fact being stated in advance. Knox held her gaze. Understood. She walked. He followed. Luna was back in 11 minutes, not 15. She arrived in the doorway of Ara's room with Violet on her hip. Violet, who was 5 and getting almost too big to be carried, but who was wrapped around her sister like a barnacle and showing no sign of releasing. And she stopped in the doorway and took in the scene, her mother propped up in the hospital bed, Knox sitting in the chair beside it that Luna considered her chair. Both of them quiet in the way of people who have just been saying something important. Her eyes went to Knox first. You're still here, she said. I'm still here, he said. Luna set Violet down, stepped into the room and went to the opposite side of the bed from Knox. She stood beside her mother and looked at him across the width of the bed and the entire geography of everything unsaid between all of them. What are you going to do? She asked him directly. Luna, Ara started. No, it's a fair question, Knox said. He looked at Luna. I don't have a complete answer yet, but I'm not going anywhere. You said that before, Luna said. Not to me, but you said it downstairs. And before that, you were gone for, she calculated which she did automatically the way she calculated everything. 7 years, before Violet was born, and 8 since me. The room went very quiet. Knox didn't look away from her. Yes. Why what, Bane? Luna, that's... Ara touched her daughter's arm. I want to know why, Luna said, and her voice was not angry, which was almost harder to take than anger. It was the voice of someone who has been carrying a question so long it has become part of their weight, and who has finally decided to put it down by asking it out loud. She never told us anything. You were just not there, and I want to know why. Knox was quiet for a long moment, and then he said something that Ara had not expected, and Luna had not expected, and Violet, who was sitting on the end of the bed eating the second half of a breakfast muffin, had certainly not expected because I was afraid. Luna stared at him. Not of you, he said quickly. Not of being a father. I didn't know about you. I meant I was afraid of what I was, what I did, the world I was in. I told myself someone like me had no business being near something, being near someone worth protecting. That leaving was protection. He paused. I was wrong about that. I know that now. I knew it the second I heard your voice on the phone. Luna processed this the way she processed everything thoroughly without broadcasting, working through it in the private interior space behind those steady eyes. Then she said, you should have let her decide that. It wasn't your decision to make for her. Knox looked at Ara. Ara looked back at him with an expression that said, she's right, and also you see what I've been dealing with. You're right, Knox said to Luna. I should have. Violet looked up from the muffin. Are you going to come live with us? She asked with the magnificent, unself-conscious directness of a 5-year-old who had heard enough of the conversation to form a preference. Violet, Ara said. I'm just asking, Violet said reasonably. Ara looked at Knox. Knox looked at Ara. Neither of them had an answer. Luna looked at all three of them and said nothing. But she moved almost imperceptibly half a step closer to the side of the bed where her mother was lying. Not toward Knox, not away from him, just closer to her mother. Like someone who is beginning to believe very cautiously that the wall she has built might not need to go up quite as high, but is not yet ready to say so out loud. The morning light came through the hospital window and fell across all four of them, and for a moment nobody spoke. And the heart monitor beeped its slow, steady rhythm, and in the middle of everything broken and uncertain and unresolved, there was this 4 people in one room breathing the same air for the first time. It wasn't enough. It wasn't close to enough. But it was a beginning. And somewhere underneath Luna's carefully maintained composure, in the part of her she kept the most tightly locked, something very small and very old and very tired, quietly exhaled. Ara came home from the hospital on a Thursday afternoon with a discharge paper, a prescription, and a list of dietary instructions that Luna immediately took possession of. Read cover to cover and folded into her jacket pocket like official documentation. The apartment looked the same. Of course it did. It had only been 2 days. But Ara stood in the doorway for a moment before she stepped inside, and she felt the strangeness of it, the way a place can stay identical while everything inside you has shifted, so the familiar becomes briefly foreign, like hearing your own name said in a voice you don't recognize. The kitchen floor was clean. Someone had wiped it. She looked at Luna. Mrs. Caldwell helped, Luna said, already moving past her. I didn't want you to see it like that. Ara stood in the kitchen and breathed. She was not going to cry again. She had made herself that rule 14 months ago, and she had broken it twice in the last 48 hours, and she wasn't going to make it 3 times. Sit down, Luna said, pulling out a chair. Not asking, directing. I made soup. It's from a can, but I added things. Luna, you don't have to. Sit down, Mama. Ara sat down. Violet climbed into the chair beside her immediately and pressed herself against Ara's arm like she was trying to fuse them together, which was her standard method of expressing relief. She didn't say anything. She just held on. Ara put her arm around her younger daughter and held her back and looked across the kitchen at Luna, who was standing at the stove stirring canned soup with the focused expression of someone performing surgery, and she thought, I almost left them. Not on purpose, not dramatically, but by degrees, by every skipped meal and every ignored headache, and every morning she told herself, just one more shift, just this week, it'll get easier. She had been leaving them, slowly, by erosion. She was not going to do that anymore. She didn't know exactly how she was going to stop, but she was not going to do it anymore. Luna, she said, thank you for what you did, both nights. Luna stirred the soup. She didn't turn around. You don't have to thank me. I know I don't have to. I want to. A pause. Luna's shoulders moved in something that wasn't quite a shrug. Okay. And I need you to know what happened with the box with the phone call. I'm not angry. I want you to know that clearly. Luna turned around. Her eyes were careful. You were upset in the hospital. I was scared. That's different. Ara held her gaze. I was scared because I haven't figured out yet what any of this means. But I was never angry at you, not for 1 second. Luna looked at her for a moment. Then she turned back to the stove. He texted, she said very casually in the particular tone she used when something was not casual at all. This morning, while you were getting ready. Ara went still. He has your number. I called him from my phone. Luna ladled soup into a bowl. So yes, he has it. She set the bowl on the table in front of Ara. She met her mother's eyes. He asked how you were. I told him fine. He said he'd like to come by. I told him that wasn't my call. Ara looked at the soup. Is it your call? Luna asked. Yes, Ara said. Okay. Luna sat down across from her. So what's the call? Knox came that evening. He did not bring flowers, which Ara had been bracing for the overcompensating gesture, the too much of a man trying to buy back time with objects. He brought groceries, a specific, practical, deliberately chosen set of groceries, fresh vegetables, real protein, the kind of food that cost more than the canned and frozen rotation that had been the architecture of their meals for longer than Ara wanted to admit. He set the bags on the counter without announcement or explanation, and he looked at Ara and said, "I checked your discharge paperwork. You need iron. The leafy greens are for that." Luna from the doorway said, "He read your discharge paperwork." "I may have taken a photo of it at the hospital," Knox said. "That's either very thoughtful or very alarming," Luna said. "Can it be both?" Knox said. Luna looked at him with those assessing eyes. "Maybe, she said and went back to the bedroom. Violet had no such ambivalence. She had been following Knox around like a small, cheerful shadow since he arrived, providing a running commentary on various items of interest in the apartment. The crack in the ceiling that looked like a rabbit. The specific way the second burner on the stove was slower than the first. The fact that Gerald, the stuffed rabbit, had originally been named George but had been renamed after Violet decided he looked more like a Gerald. Knox listened to all of it with the complete, undivided attention of someone receiving classified intelligence, which made Violet increasingly enthusiastic and increasingly specific. Ara stood at the kitchen counter watching this and felt something she didn't have a word for. Not comfort, not quite hope. Something more precarious than both the particular vertigo of standing at an edge and not yet knowing whether what's below is solid ground or open air. "You don't have to cook," she said. "I know." Knox looked up from the groceries. "Do you want me to stop?" She didn't answer immediately. "Can you even cook?" "I can do 4 things well," he said. "One of them is stir-fry." "What are the other 3? "Not relevant to dinner." Something almost like a smile. "But they're useful." Ara looked at him for a moment. Then she pulled out the cutting board and put it on the counter beside him. Duh. Dinner was strange and ordinary simultaneously, which was maybe the strangest kind of strange. Violet talked for approximately 70% of the meal without pausing for breath, which was normal. Knox asked questions between each of Violet's topics, which made her even more voluble, which Ara suspected he had understood would happen and had done on purpose to fill the silence. Luna ate and listened and said almost nothing, which was not normal. Luna always had opinions. Luna always spoke precisely and on point. Luna's silence had weight. It was the silence of someone processing, rather than absent thinking, rather than withdrawn, and Ara monitored it the way you monitor weather. At one point, Knox said to Luna, "The soup you made this morning. Violet told me you added things to it. What did you add?" Luna looked up. "Garlic, a little ginger, and half a lemon." "That's not a bad call." "I know." A pause. "Where did you learn that?" "I read it," Luna said. "A cookbook from the library. It said ginger is anti-inflammatory." Knox looked at her steadily. "How many cookbooks have you read?" 11. She held his gaze. "We couldn't afford the food in most of them. But I like knowing how things work." Ara watched Knox absorb this. Watched the muscles in his jaw shift. Watched him look down at his plate for just a moment before looking back up, and she knew what he was seeing. A 7-year-old who had read 11 cookbooks, not for pleasure, but for preparation. A 7-year-old planning for contingencies. Building knowledge like a fortress because knowledge was free and accessible and couldn't be cut off like electricity or reduced like a paycheck. He said nothing about it, which was the right call. He said, "There's a cookbook us know. It's about French technique. I'll get you a copy." Luna considered this. "I already read that one. The library has it." "I meant a copy you could keep." Another consideration. Longer. "Okay," Luna said. Same tone as always, not warm, not closed. The limited conditional. Proceed with caution, but she went back to eating and she didn't leave the table. After dinner, after Violet had been bathed and argued into pajamas with the standard negotiation of 2 books instead of 1, Knox stood in the kitchen with Ara while she made tea, and the apartment went quiet around them. In the specific way it went quiet when the children were finally still, that sudden drop in ambient noise that every parent recognized as the moment the day released you. "She monitors everything," Knox said, quietly. Not a criticism, an observation turned over with something that looked like wonder and sorrow in equal measure. "She always has." Ara poured the water. "Since she was 4, maybe." I don't know where it came from. Knox was quiet. You know where it came from, Ara said. He said nothing. She's you, Ara said. Not cruelly, just factually. The way she watches a room before she commits to anything. The way she calculates before she speaks. The way she holds things in until she decides what to do with them. She set the kettle down. I used to think it was just her. But then I looked at you last night in the waiting room and it was like looking at her in 30 years. Knox put both hands flat on the counter. Does that scare you? A little, Ara said honestly, because I know what it comes carrying that much awareness. At 7, it costs everything. I can change that. Ara looked at him. I mean, he stopped, started again more carefully. I mean, I want to. I don't want her to have to carry the room anymore. That's not her job. You can't just decide that and have it be true. No, he said, I know, I have to earn it. You have to earn a lot of things. I know that too. He looked at her directly. Ara, I'm not here to rewind. I can't give them the years I missed. I can't give you what you should have had. I know that. I'm asking for what's possible from here. That's all. Ara wrapped her hands around her mug. It was warm, and the warmth was grounding, and she needed grounding because this conversation was the one she had been having in her head for 8 years in various permutations, and having it out loud was different. It was heavier and more real and stripped of all the ways she had been able to control it when it only existed inside her. I don't trust you yet, she said. You shouldn't. I'm not saying never. She looked at him. I'm saying not yet, and you do not get to rush that. Agreed. And if Luna doesn't want you here, then I'm not here. She's 7. I know how old she is, he said quietly. She gets to decide. Both of them do. He paused, but I'd like the chance to make the decision harder. Ara almost smiled, caught it. That was almost charming. Almost as further than I expected tonight. She did smile then, small and contained and against her better judgment. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, an unknown number. She frowned, tapped it to dismiss, and then it buzzed again. Same number. She picked it up. A text message. No name. Just tell Mercer to check his messages. He has 24 hours before this becomes your problem too. Ara stared at the screen. Knox's phone buzzed at the exact same moment. The temperature in this room changed. Not dramatically, not all at once. But Ara felt it the way Knox went still in a completely different way than his usual stillness. This was not the stillness of someone thinking. This was the stillness of a predator who has just identified a threat and is calculating trajectory. Knox, her voice was low, the girls were asleep. What is that? He had his phone in his hand. He read whatever was on the screen. His face did not change, not a muscle, not a line. But his jaw set in the specific way it had set in the waiting room when he told the nurse, I'm their father, which she now recognized as the expression he wore when he was making a decision that was not going to bend. It's work, he said. Work. Yes. What kind of work sends a message to my phone? He looked at her. The kind that found out where I've been tonight. He was already moving, not panicked, not rushed, but with that efficient, purposeful motion of someone executing a plan. This is not a danger to you, but I need you to understand there are people who will use proximity to me as leverage. Now that they know I'm here, your address is Knox. She set the mug down. Her voice was very controlled. Tell me exactly what is happening. He turned and looked at her, and for the first time that night, for the first time since the waiting room, maybe for the first time since she had known him, he looked tired. Not physically tired. Tired in the deeper way, in the structural way, like something load-bearing had been under pressure for too long. I run things, he said. You know that. You knew that then? The people I run things with, they don't like surprises. Me canceling a meeting last night was a surprise. Me being here with you being reachable, that's a vulnerability they now know about. So coming here endangered us. No, he stopped. The honesty of it clearly cost him. Potentially, if I don't handle this correctly, but I will handle it correctly. In 24 hours. Yes. Ara looked at him for a long moment. Her mind was moving fast through all of it. The groceries on the counter, Violet's voice describing Gerald's name change, Luna saying he texted the soup, the cookbook, the hand flat on the counter when he said, I want to earn it. She was running all of it against this moment, this text, this expression on his face, this world he had walked out of her kitchen to go back to 8 years ago. I want them out of this, she said. Whatever that world is, whatever you do in it, I want it nowhere near them. That is not negotiable. That is not a thing we discuss or compromise on. That is the line. Yes, Knox said immediately. If that line is not possible with the life you have, then I change the life I have. He said it like it had already been decided, like it was not a dramatic statement but a logistical one. I've been thinking about that since last night. It's not simple. It doesn't happen overnight, but it happens. I will make it happen. Ara searched his face. You mean that? I've meant very few things as much as I mean that. The apartment was silent around them. Somewhere down the hall, Violet made a small sound in her sleep and then was quiet again. Go handle your 24 hours, Ara said finally, and then come back, and we'll talk about what comes next. Knox looked at her. You're sure? I'm not sure of anything, she said, but go anyway. He left at 9:47. Luna heard the front door close from her bedroom where she had been lying completely still in the dark for the last hour. Not sleeping, listening to the conversation in the kitchen, the way she listened to everything with her full attention and her face pointed at the ceiling so no one would know. She had heard most of it, not all. The parts about work and 24 hours and the life I have, those had come through the wall clearly enough, and she had filed them in the same place she filed everything, the private interior cabinet, where she kept the things she was still processing. Violet breathed steadily in the bed across the room, genuinely asleep in the complete and boneless way that only Violet could manage in the middle of a crisis, some miraculous constitutional ability to rest that Luna had always envied and never possessed. Luna stared at the ceiling. She thought about Knox's face at the table when she told him she had read 11 cookbooks. She had been watching him when she said it, the way she always watched for the reaction people had to the facts of their life, the pity, the discomfort, the overcorrection into false cheerfulness. She had cataloged all of those reactions in various adults over the years and had learned to expect them. Knox had looked not pitying, not uncomfortable. He had looked like a man who had received information that recalibrated something and who was doing the recalibration in real time and who was angry but not at her, angry in a directed internal way, angry at himself. She wasn't sure what to do with that. She wasn't sure what to do with any of it. She thought he's dangerous. She had understood that from the first Google search, from the way the meeting had been described in the text, she had only partially heard from the specific tone of her mother's voice when she said the line is not negotiable. She was 7, not naive, and she had grown up reading the temperature of rooms and people more carefully than most adults ever learned to. He was dangerous, that was real. But he had also sat in a plastic hospital chair all night without sleeping and hadn't moved when Violet fell asleep in his lap, and had looked at the 11 cookbooks with that specific recalibrating anger that was not at Luna, had never been at Luna, had been pointed squarely and permanently at himself. She didn't know what to do with the combination of those two things. She fell asleep at 11:23, still not knowing which was new for her. Usually she resolved things before she slept. She had always resolved things before she slept. She woke at 3 in the morning to the sound of her mother crying, not loud. Ara never cried loud. It was the contained kind, the kind that had been compressed into almost nothing small breaths through a closed throat, the sound of someone who had held something in for so long that sleep had lowered the defenses just enough for it to leak. Luna got out of bed. She padded down the hall and pushed open her mother's bedroom door and stood in the doorway. Ara was sitting up against the headboard, knees pulled to her chest, one hand over her mouth, eyes closed. She had not heard Luna come in. Luna crossed the room, climbed up onto the bed, and sat next to her mother. She didn't say anything. She just put her small hand on top of her mother's hand, the one pressed over her mouth, and held it there. Ara opened her eyes, looked at her daughter, made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and pulled Luna against her with both arms. They sat like that for a long time. I'm scared, Ara said into Luna's hair. I know, Luna said. I don't know if I'm making the right choices. You never do, Luna said. You make them anyway. Ara laughed, a real one broken at the edges. Did you just quote me back at me? You said that once, when I was scared about starting school. You said you never know if you are making the right choices, you just make them anyway and fix the ones that are wrong. Ara pressed her cheek to the top of Luna's head. I said that, yes. That was pretty smart of me. Sometimes you are, Luna said. Ara squeezed her tighter. I love you more than anything in the world. You know that. I know. A pause. I love you too. Another pause shorter. Even when you don't eat. Luna, I'm just saying. I know you are. Ara pulled back enough to look at her daughter's face. You're going to let me take care of us again. You understand that's my job. I'm taking it back. Luna looked at her. I mean it, Ira said. I'm not going to collapse again. I'm going to sleep. I'm going to eat. I'm going to be here. Okay. Luna studied her for a long moment, the same thorough assessment she gave everything. Then, okay. Okay, Ira said, but I'm keeping the discharge paperwork. Of course you are. They sat in the dark together, and somewhere across the city, Knox Mercer was handling whatever needed to be handled, and somewhere in a bedroom down the hall, Violet was sleeping the deep and merciless sleep of the unburdened, and in this room on this bed, a mother and her daughter who had been quietly holding the world up for years were finally, for the first time in a very long time, letting each other share the weight. It wasn't fixed, not close to fixed. But Ara was home, and Luna was beside her daughter, and their apartment was quiet. And outside the city went on making its noise enormous and indifferent, while inside something small and essential held. Knox came back in 31 hours, not 24. Luna counted. Of course she counted. He showed up at the door on a Saturday morning with no warning text, no call ahead, just a knock. 2 knocks, actually the specific pattern of someone who is not entirely sure of their welcome and is trying to take up as little space as possible with their arrival. Ara was still in her room. Violet was eating cereal at the kitchen table. Luna answered the door in her pajamas with a book under her arm and looked at him and said, You're 7 hours late. Knox looked at her steadily. I know, I'm sorry. You should have texted. You're right, I should have. Luna assessed him. He looked like someone who had not slept in 31 hours, which tracked, and like someone who had been in at least one conversation that had cost him something significant, which also tracked. There was a cut on his left hand, small, partially healed, that he had not had 2 nights ago. She chose not to comment on the cut. My mom is still sleeping. She needs to sleep. Okay. You can wait in the kitchen. Don't wake her. Okay. Luna stepped back from the door. Knox walked in and sat at the kitchen table across from Violet, who looked up from her cereal and said with the calm of someone confirming a fact, You came back. I came back, Knox said. Violet pointed her spoon at him. Gerald wants to meet you. Who's Gerald? My rabbit. He's very important. Then I'd like to meet him. Violet slid off her chair, immediately abandoning her cereal, and disappeared down the hallway. Luna sat down at the table and opened her book and did not look at Knox, which was its own form of communication, not hostile, but not open. Monitoring from a distance, the way you watch weather. Did you handle it? She asked without looking up. Knox was quiet for a moment. Yes. The thing from the other night. Yes. Luna turned a page. Is it going to happen again? Knox looked at the side of her face. She was still not looking at him. I'm working on making sure it doesn't. That's not the same as no. No, he said. It's not. Luna turned another page. Okay. She said it the way she said most things, without inflection, filling it, moving on. But her hand on the book was tight, and Knox noticed. Violet reappeared with Gerald, who was a brown stuffed rabbit with one ear that flopped differently than the other due to what Violet described as a surgery she had performed when she was 3 with safety scissors. She presented him to Knox with both hands, the way you present something sacred. Knox took the rabbit. He held it with the same complete seriousness with which he held everything. He looked at it for a moment. I can see why he's important, he said. Violet beamed. Ara appeared in the kitchen doorway at 9:45, dressed her hair back, the bruise on her cheek fading from deep purple to the greenish yellow of something healing. She stopped when she saw Knox at the table with Violet in his lap, explaining Gerald's medical history in extensive detail. Knox looked up. Ara looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the bruise on his hand. Kitchen, she said. Knox set Violet down, gently murmured something to her about getting Gerald's full story later, and followed Ara into the far end of the kitchen where the girls couldn't hear easily. 31 hours, Ara said. I know, it took longer than... What happened to your hand? Knox glanced at it. It's nothing. Knox. A disagreement, he said. That has been resolved. Ara looked at him with the expression of someone deciding how far to push and calculating the return. Is it done, whatever it was? For now. For now, she repeated. I told you it's not simple, he said. I told you it doesn't happen overnight. What I can tell you is that your address has been contained. Nobody in my world is going to use you or the girls as leverage. I made that extremely clear. How extremely? Extremely enough that I won't need to repeat it. Ara held his gaze. She had known 8 years ago the broad shape of the world he moved through. She had chosen back then to look slightly sideways at it, not ignoring it, but not looking at it directly either, the way you don't look directly at a bright light. Standing in this kitchen now with her daughters 20 feet away, she found she could no longer afford that angle. She had to look at it straight on. I have 2 daughters, she said. Same words as the hospital. Different weight now. They cannot be collateral in whatever you do. They won't be. You can't guarantee that. I can guarantee that I will spend every resource I have making it true, he said. That's what I've been doing for 31 hours. I know that's not the same as a guarantee. I know you have every reason not to believe me. But I need you to know that those 31 hours, every one of them, was for them. Ara looked at him. Down the hall, Violet was telling Luna something in the elevated declarative voice she used when she considered her subject extremely important. Luna's quieter voice responded. The ordinary sound of it, the sheer, unremarkable domesticity of her children talking in the next room, while she stood in her kitchen, cracked something open in Ara's chest that she hadn't known was sealed. There's a school event next Friday, she said, at Luna's school. A reading thing. She's been preparing something for weeks. She watched his face. I want you to come. Knox went still. To a school event. With us, as she stopped, chose the word carefully, as someone who is trying, that's all. Not as a father figure, not as anything with a title. Just as someone trying. She held his gaze. Luna has to agree. If she says no, it doesn't happen. Of course, I'll ask her tonight. He said her name the way he used to 8 years ago, just slightly differently than everyone else said it, like it meant something specific. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said. Ask me again in 6 months if we're all still standing. She asked Luna that night after Violet was in bed. She sat on the edge of Luna's mattress and laid it out plainly the way she had always talked to Luna, without softening the edges, without the condescending simplifications that Luna had always seen straight through anyway. He wants to come to your reading event, Ara said. Next Friday. I told him it was your decision. Luna had her book open on her knee, but she had stopped reading. Just to watch. Just to be there. Not as he's not going to introduce himself as my dad. No, he understands that. Luna was quiet. She looked at her book without seeing it. Chloe Martinez has a dad who comes to things, she said, not sadly, observationally, filing a fact. He brings those folding chairs with the cup holders. He's always early. Ara said nothing. She waited. Okay, Luna said. He can come. She looked up. But he sits in the back. I'll tell him. And he doesn't talk to my teacher. Okay. And if it's weird, then we leave and we don't do it again, Ara said. Your call, all the way. Luna nodded. She looked back at her book. Then, Mama, do you still have feelings for him? The question was so direct and so perfectly Luna that Ara almost laughed. That is a complicated question. I know, I'm asking anyway. Ara looked at her 7-year-old daughter who was watching her with those old soul eyes waiting for an honest answer, because she had always known the difference between an honest answer and a managed one. I don't know yet, Ara said. I know I did once. I know I was angry for a long time. I know now is different from both of those. She paused. Is that okay? Yes, Luna said. I just wanted to know what was real. That's what's real. Luna nodded, went back to her book. Then without looking up, he held Gerald the right way. Ara blinked. What? When Violet gave him Gerald, he held him correctly, like he was actually important. Well, Luna turned a page. Most people do this. She made a brief, careless gesture with one hand, the gesture of someone who has been handed a child's toy and is performing interest rather than feeling it. He didn't do that. He just held him. Ara looked at her daughter for a long moment. That's a small thing, she said carefully. Small things are how you know, Luna said. Anyone can do big things. Small things are the ones people don't perform. Ara sat with that for a moment. Then she leaned down and kissed her daughter's forehead. Good night, baby. Good night. A pause. Make sure you eat something before you sleep. Luna. I'm just saying. The school event was on a Friday at 6 in the evening in the gymnasium that smelled like floor wax and industrial cleaner and had been decorated with paper stars and hand-lettered signs by kids who took the assignment very seriously. Luna was reading a piece she had written herself, 3 paragraphs, about what home meant, and she had practiced it 17 times by Ara's count, standing in the kitchen with the paper in front of her voice, even no stumbling because Luna did not stumble when she had prepared. Knox arrived 8 minutes early and sat in the back row as instructed. He was wearing dark clothes that were not his usual dark, something slightly less severe, like a concession he had made without being asked. He sat with his hands rested on his knees, and he looked at nothing in particular while the gymnasium filled around him, and he looked, Ara thought, when she spotted him from across the room, profoundly out of place in the specific way of someone who knows they're out of place and has decided to be there anyway. Violet found him before Ara could redirect her. She materialized at his side and climbed into the empty chair next to him and said loudly, Luna is going to read something she wrote. It's about home. I heard it 14 times. 17, Luna said, appearing from nowhere in her school dress, paper and hand expression, neutral. She looked at Knox. She looked at the chair he was in, second to last row, far side, exactly as specified. You're in the right place, she said. I followed instructions, he said. Something moved across Luna's face, not quite approval, not quite amusement, something adjacent to both. Okay, she said, and went to find her class. She was extraordinary. Knox sat in the back row of an elementary school gymnasium, surrounded by strangers, and watched his 7-year-old daughter stand at a microphone in front of a room full of people and read 3 paragraphs she had written herself, in a voice that did not waver once, and he felt something happening in his chest that he had no previous frame of reference for. She had written about small things, soup with ginger and lemon, the crack in the ceiling that looked like a rabbit, the sound of her sister's laugh, which she described as arriving before it was finished, like Violet laughed at things before they were done being funny, because she already knew. The weight of her mother's hand when she was scared in the dark. She had not written about absence, not directly. But Knox heard it anyway in the architecture of what she had chosen to describe, the specific, intimate inventory of small domestic details that only gets compiled by someone who has learned not to take them for granted. When she finished, the room applauded. Luna folded her paper precisely and walked back to her seat without looking at the audience, which meant she was not looking for approval. She had already decided before she stood up that she had done it right. She was absolutely his daughter. Ara, 2 rows in front of Knox, was pressing her fingers to the corners of her eyes. Violet beside Knox was clapping so hard both hands had gone red. Knox sat completely still and did not applaud because he could not trust what his face would do if he moved. Afterward, in the parking lot, Luna came to find him while Ara was talking to her teacher, and Violet was running circles around a lamppost for reasons that required no explanation. She stood in front of him in the dark with her papers still folded in her hand. Well, she said. It was the best thing I've heard in years, Knox said. No qualifier, no softening. Just the fact. Luna looked at him. You're not just saying that. I don't just say things. She considered him. The part about the soup. Did you hear that? Yes. That was real. I actually think ginger helps. I know, he said. You told me. Luna looked at the folded paper for a moment. Then she held it out to him. Knox looked at it. He looked at her. You can have the copy, she said, not warmly, not sentimentally, in the same tone she used for everything measured, conditional, calibrated. I have another one. He took it, carefully, the way he had held Gerald. Luna watched him. Then she turned and walked back toward her mother. Over her shoulder, not turning around, she said, You can sit closer next time, if there is a next time. Knox stood in the parking lot holding a piece of paper, and watching her walk away, and said nothing because there was nothing adequate to say, and because some moments are not improved by words, and because Knox Mercer, who had spent 20 years building walls and burning bridges and treating tenderness like a liability, was standing in an elementary school parking lot at 6:45 on a Friday evening and discovering at some cost to everything he thought he knew about himself that there were things in the world that could undo him completely, and that two of them were currently under 10 years old. The call came at 10:30 that night. Not a text this time. A call to Knox's phone from a number he recognized, a number that meant the situation he had declared resolved 31 hours ago, was not in fact entirely resolved. He was sitting in his car outside Ara's building. He had walked them up after the school event stood in the hallway, while Violet described Gerald's reaction to the evening in elaborate detail, watched Luna disappear into the bedroom with her second copy of the essay, without looking back but also without closing the door all the way. He had said goodnight to Ara in the doorway, and she had looked at him for a moment and said carefully, "That was a good night." And he had said yes, it was. And she had nodded and closed the door, and he had stood in the hallway for approximately 3 seconds longer than necessary before going back downstairs. He answered the call on the second ring. "Tell me," he said. The voice on the other end was a man named Carver, who was not technically Knox's problem, but was connected to people who were in ways that had become newly complicated in the last 48 hours. "You made some promises," Carver said, "to some people about stepping back." "I made intentions clear," Knox said. "Not promises. Semantics. Not to me." A pause. "There are people who think a man stepping away from his position creates a vacancy, and people who don't like vacancies." "There is no vacancy," Knox said. "I'm handling a transition. That's different." "Is it?" "Yes," his voice was flat. "And anyone who moves on my position before that transition is complete will find out exactly how different it is." Another pause. Longer. "You've got a soft spot," Carver said. "People know that now. That's new. That's a problem." Knox was quiet for a moment. He looked up at the window on the third floor, Ara's apartment, light still on the silhouette of someone moving past. "Tell the people who know it," he said, "that the soft spot is the last mistake they'll make. And tell them that from me specifically, so there's no ambiguity about who said it." He ended the call. He sat in the car for a long time looking up at that window. He had told Ara he was going to change the life he had. He had meant it. He still meant it. But meaning something and executing it were two different disciplines, and between them lay a distance that was populated by men like Carver in situations like this one, and it was going to require everything he had to cross it without leaving damage on either side. He pulled out Luna's essay. He unfolded it. He read it again in the dark of his car in the parking lot below the apartment where his daughters were going to sleep in the next hour. The weight of her mother's hand when she was scared in the dark. He folded it back up, put it in his inside jacket pocket against his chest where it would stay. Then he started the car. He had work to do. The kind of work that would, if he did it right, eventually mean he never had to sit in a parking lot feeling like the world was splitting into two irreconcilable halves again. It was not going to be clean. It was not going to be fast. And there were going to be nights between here and there that were worse than this one. But he had a piece of paper in his jacket pocket written by a 7-year-old who had decided with extreme caution and full reservation of future judgment to let him sit closer next time. That was enough to drive toward. That was, he was discovering, more than enough. 3 weeks after the school event, Knox Mercer showed up at the apartment on a Tuesday evening with a French technique cookbook and a bruise along his left jaw that he had clearly attempted to conceal and had failed because concealing things from Ara Chen had never once worked, and he appeared to have not yet fully absorbed this. Ara opened the door, looked at his face, and said nothing for exactly 3 seconds. "Don't," Knox said before she could speak. "I haven't said anything." "You're about to." "I'm about to ask you to come inside," she said. "That's all." He came inside. Violet was already at his elbow before the door closed, asking about his face with the direct and medically curious energy of a child who had no filter between thought and speech. "What happened to your face?" "I walked into something," Knox said. Violet studied him. "That's what Mama says when she doesn't want to talk about something." "Violet," Ara said, "I'm just saying." Violet transferred her attention to the cookbook under his arm. Is that for Luna? It is. She's going to pretend she doesn't care and then read it in one night. Violet said this with the cheerful authority of someone reporting established fact, then wandered back to whatever she had been doing before the door opened. Knox set the book on the counter. He looked at Ara. She was looking at his jaw with the particular expression she had developed over the last 3 weeks. Not the old expression, the guarded recalibrating one she'd worn in the hospital and in the kitchen those first nights. This one was newer, more direct. The expression of someone who has decided to stop looking sideways and has not yet decided whether looking straight ahead is better or just more honest. How bad is the other situation? She asked. Manageable. Knox, he met her eyes. There's a man named Carver who has been positioning himself for weeks. He made a move last night that was designed to test whether I was serious about the transition. He paused. I demonstrated that I was serious. With your face, he looked worse. Acha pressed her fingers to her temples. This is the part where I'm supposed to say I can't do this. I know, dear, but I'm not going to say that. She dropped her hands. Because I knew who you were when I called you back. I knew it when I let you come to the school. I'm not going to stand here and act surprised that it's complicated. She looked at him. What I need to know is whether it's getting less complicated or more. Less, he said. It's going to get worse before it gets less, but the direction is less. How much worse? I don't know exactly. Approximately. He was quiet for a moment. A few more weeks, possibly a month. Carver is not the last obstacle, but he was the largest. After this, he stopped. After this, I can move faster on the transition. And then I am considerably less dangerous to be near. Ara looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up the cookbook and walked it down the hall to Luna's room and knocked once and opened the door and set it on the end of the bed without a word and came back. Luna's voice came down the hall. Tell him? Thank you. Knox heard it from the kitchen. Something crossed his face that he didn't try to contain. She says thank you, Ara told him. I heard. Luna came out of her room 40 minutes later, which meant she had lasted 40 minutes before opening the cookbook, which was 13 minutes longer than Violet had predicted, and 4 minutes shorter than Luna would admit. She sat down at the kitchen table where Knox was helping Ara sort through a stack of bills, not intrusively, not taking over, just sitting beside her and doing the math she'd been putting off because there was always something more urgent, and she put the cookbook flat on the table and opened it to page 63. This technique is wrong, she said, pointing. Knox leaned over and looked. Which part? This part. The timing. If you do it this way, the butter burns before the garlic is ready. It should be reversed. Knox looked at the page, then he looked at her. You haven't made this recipe? No, but I've made things adjacent to it, and the logic is the same. She tapped the page. The timing is wrong. Knox was quiet for a moment. Then you're right. Luna looked at him. I know. I'll take it back and get you a better one. Don't. She closed the book. I like finding the errors. It means I'm reading carefully. She stood up, then almost as an afterthought directed at neither of them specifically. The garlic thing is on page 81 too, but that one I think is a typo. She went back to her room. Ara looked at Knox. Knox looked at the cookbook. She's going to be terrifying, he said, not with apprehension, with something that was unmistakably pride, and that he made no effort to hide, and which Ara noticed and filed in the part of herself she was trying to be honest about. She already is, Ara said. The second twist came on a Thursday, 12 days later, and it did not announce itself. Ara was at work, a new job, a better one. Administrative assistant at a medical office that had actual hours and actual benefits, and did not require her to be on her feet for 19 hours at a stretch. Knox had arranged the interview. She had gone back and forth about accepting his help for 4 days. Then Luna had said, with the calm of someone delivering a verdict, "It's not charity if you earn the job, Mama. Just go." She had gone. She had gotten it. The girls were at school. Knox had taken to picking them up 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, not because it had been formally agreed upon, but because it had evolved the way things evolve when people stop resisting the shape of something that fits. Violet had declared the car ride's official story time and spent the entirety of each trip telling Knox escalating narratives about Gerald's imaginary adventures, which Knox listened to with complete seriousness and occasional questions that made Violet's stories progressively more elaborate. Luna tolerated the car rides, which by Luna's scale was nearly an endorsement. On this Thursday, Knox was 7 minutes from the school when Dario called. He answered on the speaker. "What?" "Carver," Dario said. "He's not done." Knox's jaw tightened. "What did he do?" "He didn't do anything, yet." A pause that carried weight. "He knows about the girls. Not just that they exist. He knows their school. He knows their schedule. He was asking questions of the wrong people, and those people fortunately told us instead of him." The car went very quiet. "How long ago?" Knox said. 2 hours. I've had eyes on the school since I found out. They're fine. They're in class. Nothing has moved." Knox was already calculating. "I need 3 people at the school, now. Plain clothes. Nobody goes near those girls who isn't you or me." "Already done. I called you as soon as it was covered." "Carver's location." "We're working on it." "Work faster." Knox's voice had not risen. It had gone quieter, which was more alarming. "And Dario, nobody touches him until I say. Am I clear? Nobody moves on him without my direct word." "Understood. Call me the minute you have him." He ended the call. His hands on the wheel were completely steady. His mind was not. His mind was doing something it had never done before. In a crisis, it was not running calculations about Carver, about positioning, about response strategies. It was running calculations about 2 small girls in a classroom, 8 minutes away, one of whom would be sitting completely upright monitoring the room, and one of whom was probably telling a story to whoever was sitting next to her, and neither of whom knew that their name had been in the mouth of a dangerous man this morning. He drove faster. He was outside the school in 6 minutes. He sat in the car and looked at the building and made himself breathe. His people were inside. Everything was covered. The girls were in class. Nothing had happened. Nothing was going to happen. He was going to make absolutely certain of that. He called Ara. She picked up on the second ring. "Knox, I'm at work." "I know. I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm while I tell you." A beat of silence. "Tell me." He told her, cleanly, without minimizing, without overloading. The facts, the current status, what was covered, what wasn't yet resolved. He heard her breathing change in the middle of it, not panic, just the sharp recalibration of a mother who has received threat-level information about her children and is processing it at speed. When he finished, she said, "Are they safe right now?" "Yes, completely." "You're sure?" "I am physically outside the building." "Yes." Another silence. "You drove to the school?" "Yes." "Before you called me?" "I wanted to be certain before I..." "Knox." Her voice was strange, not angry, not frightened anymore. Something else, something he couldn't quite read over the phone. "Thank you." He hadn't expected that. "I'm going to fix this. Carver." "I know you're going to fix it." "That's not..." She stopped. "I'll call you on my break. Don't let them out of your sight." "I won't." She hung up. Knox sat outside the school with his eyes on the front door and his phone in his hand and thought about the specific tone of her voice when she said thank you. Not gratitude exactly. Something more structural than gratitude. Something that sounded like the sound a door makes when it opens from the inside, not pushed, not forced. Opened from within by someone who has decided. Pickup time came. Knox walked to the door with Dario 6 feet behind him and waited. Violet came out first, found him immediately in the crowd with the radar she seemed to have developed specifically for locating him, and arrived at his side, talking before she had fully stopped moving. "Gerald had a dream," she announced. "I told Miss Patterson about it, and she said stuffed animals don't dream. But I think she's wrong. Don't you think she's wrong?" "I think Gerald dreams extensively," Knox said. Violet pointed at him. "Exactly." Luna came out 30 seconds later. She found him the same way Violet did immediately, without searching, like she had already known where he was going to be. She walked to him and stopped, and looked at his face, and then looked at Dario, who was not someone she had seen before, and then looked back at Knox. "Something happened," she said. "Not a question." "Everything is fine," Knox said. "That's not what I asked." Knox looked at her for a moment. Then he crouched down to her level, which he had started doing, not because she needed it, but because it was a choice about how to occupy space around her, less of him, more of her. Someone was asking questions they shouldn't have been asking. About you and Violet. I found out about it, and I handled it, and it's over. Luna's face did not change, but her hands, which had been loose at her sides, closed. Were we in danger? No, I made sure of that before anything else. How long ago did you find out? About 2 hours before pickup. And you came here? Yes. Luna looked at him. She was doing the calculation. He could see it running behind those eyes, the same way he ran calculations, the same architecture. She was measuring the 2 hours. She was measuring the choice he had made with those 2 hours, which was to put himself between a threat and his children before he did anything else, before he called anyone, before he made any move that wasn't directly pointed at keeping them safe. She looked at Dario again. Is he with you, Iamon? Yes. Is he good? He's the best I have. Luna turned this over. Then as she looked at Knox with the expression he had come to know as her version of a conclusion, not warm, not cold, but settled. The expression of someone who has finished the calculation and is accepting the result. Okay, she said. She took his hand. Not Violet's hand. His. She reached out and took his hand, the same way she took her mother's hand when they crossed streets, matter of fact, practical, no ceremony, and she started walking toward the car. Knox stood completely still for exactly 1 second. Then he walked with her. And he did not say anything because there was nothing to say, and because Luna had just told him everything important in the language she actually spoke, not in words, not in declarations, but in a single deliberate, unceremonious gesture of trust. Dario, walking 6 feet behind, looked straight ahead and said nothing, but Knox heard him exhale. Carver was found that evening, handled. The specific details were not the kind that belonged in the same sentence as soup with ginger or school gymnasiums or stuffed rabbits named Gerald. Knox handled them anyway thoroughly finely, with the particular efficiency of a man who has decided that this part of his life ends here and is prepared to do what closing it requires. He called Ara at 10. It's done, he said. She was quiet for a moment. All of it. Carver is not a problem. The people connected to Carver have been made to understand clearly that you and the girls are outside any conversation they ever have. Permanently. He paused. This is the last night I'm making a call like this one. Knox, well, I mean it. The transition, it's not weeks anymore. It's days. I have one more thing to finalize and then I'm out. Completely out. New structure, new legal operations. Dario manages what remains. My name is off everything that matters. He stopped. I should have started this a long time ago. I started it the night Luna called. Ara was quiet. I know it's not enough to say, he said. I know actions are the only thing that counts from here. But I want you to know that I want you to know what that call did. What she did. She didn't just call me to the hospital. She called me out of a life I had been in for so long, I had stopped being able to see what it was costing. He paused. She's 7, and she saw it in 30 seconds. She sees everything, Ara said softly. I know. His voice was rougher than he intended. I know she does. A long silence, comfortable somehow. The kind of silence between people who have passed the point of filling empty space with noise. Come for dinner tomorrow, Ara said. Violet wants to tell you about Gerald's dream in full. She's been saving it. I'll be there. Knox. She said his name the same way she had in the hospital doorway, the same way she'd said it in the kitchen, that specific wait. Bring something for Luna, something she doesn't expect. Not a book. He thought about this. I have an idea. Don't tell me. She'll know I knew. He almost smiled. Good night, Ara. Good night. He brought a compass. Not ornate. Not expensive in a showy way. A small, precise brass-cased compass in a wooden box, the kind used for actual navigation, with a note tucked underneath it in Knox's handwriting. 4 words only because Knox did not waste words for finding your way. Luna opened the box at the dinner table while Violet was in the middle of describing Gerald's dream with full dramatic recreations that required the use of both arms. She looked at the compass. She read the note. She looked at Knox. I always know my way, she said. I know, he said. That one's for when you are somewhere new. Luna looked at the compass for a long moment. She turned it in her hand, watched the needle settle. It works, she said. Of course it works. She set it on the table next to her plate. not in the box, on the table where she could see it. She didn't say anything else about it, but she ate the rest of dinner with one hand resting next to it, occasionally glancing at the needle, and when she helped clear the plates, she carried it carefully to the counter and set it upright where it would not fall. Violet finished the Gerald dream narrative at approximately the same moment as dessert, which was fruit that Luna had cut and arranged because old habits died slowly, and Luna's habit of taking care of things was not going to vanish overnight, but was beginning very gradually in small increments, to share space with the ability to let other people help. Ara made coffee and Knox washed the dishes, which he had started doing without being asked 2 weeks ago, which was the kind of small, unrequested thing that Luna had always said was how, you know. Ara stood at the counter with her coffee and watched him at the sink and thought about 8 years in hospital floors and locked boxes and phone calls made in the dark by a child who had decided enough was enough. She thought about how a family did not arrive. It was not a destination. It was a direction, something you move toward incrementally by accumulation, by small choices made consistently, by showing up 7 hours late and then 31 hours late, and then on time by sitting in the back row and then being told you can sit closer by holding a stuffed rabbit correctly by putting a compass on the table of a 7-year-old who already knew her way home. Knox, she said. He turned off the tap, looked at her. She set down the coffee. She crossed the kitchen. She stood in front of him the way she had stood in the hospital room doorway, direct, unguarded, no angle. She put her hand flat against his chest over the place where she knew he kept Luna's essay. In his jacket, had kept it there since the night he took it, and she felt his heartbeat under her palm, steady and present. She kissed him. Not a dramatic kiss, not the kind that had a crescendo. The quiet kind, the kind that means I see you all of it, the bruises and the 31 hours and the parking lot and the compass, and I am choosing this with my eyes open. He put one hand over hers against his chest and held it there. When she stepped back, she looked at him and said, "Don't leave again." "Never," he said, and it was not a promise dressed up as reassurance. It was a decision that had already been made, that had been made in a parking garage at 2 a.m. 3 weeks ago, and had not wavered once since. Never again. Luna from the hallway had seen it. She had come out for water and had stopped in the doorway and had seen her mother's hand on Knox's chest in the way he covered it with his own, and she had stood there for exactly 4 seconds before retreating silently back to her room. She lay on her bed. She looked at the ceiling. She put the compass on the nightstand where she could see the needle. She thought about the crack in the ceiling that looked like a rabbit. She thought about the weight of her mother's hand in the dark. She thought about Gerald's ear and the specific way Knox held him. She thought about the back row of a school gymnasium and the words "sit closer" next time leaving her mouth before she had fully decided to say them. She thought about a phone call she had made 3 weeks ago in a dark kitchen with shaking hands to a number on a piece of paper that her mother had buried and never touched. She had not known that night if it was the right call. She had known only that she was 7 and she could not hold everything alone anymore, and something had to change before the thing she was holding dropped. She looked at the compass needle. It had settled perfectly still, pointing north, always north regardless of where you turned the box, regardless of how lost you were. She thought, I think it was the right call. She thought, I think we're going to be okay. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, the last thought in her mind before sleep was not a calculation, not a contingency, not a quietly maintained emergency plan. It was just her mother's voice down the hall, and the low sound of Knox's answer, and Violet's breathing in the bed across the room, deep and untroubled, the breathing of someone who had always believed things would be fine and had in this specific, particular hard-won case turned out to be exactly right. Luna had made 2 phone calls the night everything changed. The first one saved her mother's life. The second one brought them home.